the NFL trade deadline, 2 weeks away. 2 weeks away. It's week 7, so 2 weeks today. Last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they made some moves. They went out, got William Jackson III at the deadline. They traded Chase Claypool at the deadline. Shout out to the Chicago Bears and the Miami Dolphins. This year, everybody's going to be speculating again. Omar Khan's going to want to make some moves. The Pittsburgh Steelers are a winning team, and if they win this weekend, I think there's like a real shot that they evaluate, hey, what do we need to do to take that next step to kind of secure ourselves as a playoff team in the second half of the season. Mark Caboli of The Athletic was asked who is the top candidate for the Pittsburgh Steelers to be traded at the deadline. His answer, third-string quarterback Mason Rudolph. This is year 15 in a row, I believe, that Mason Rudolph has been named the top candidate for the Pittsburgh Steelers to be traded at the deadline. Your thoughts? You think that's a realistic thing at this point? Does Mason even hold any trade value this deep in his NFL career and this long without playing a game, or are we just picking a guy and running with it because there's nobody else to trade?
I think it's a little bit more of the latter. I think it's more that there aren't super appealing. I shouldn't say that. It's not that there aren't super appealing players on the Steelers roster, but none that I think the team is really willing to part with at this point. I think Mason is probably the most likely to get traded on a team of not very likely guys to get traded at all. And I think you're also kind of working under the assumption that teams are going to need quarterbacks at some point. Yes. Like any team that does need a quarterback at this point in the year is going to be really desperate for one. So yeah, that kind of makes sense when it pops into my head. Just that Mason would be, but that also might be because we've been talking about Mason maybe getting traded for the past, however many millions of years.
That's what I'm saying.
And I think, I don't know. Honestly, I think the longer that Mason sits on the bench, the more that his value kind of goes up, quite honestly, the less that you see him play, quite honestly. Like, I think,
really? You think it goes up?
Well, yeah, I think you can kind of talk yourself into, oh, this guy's been around NFL teams before, he has some experience in that sense. Like, he hasn't put a whole lot on like film, like he hasn't had to, really step into the fire as a starting quarterback very recently. So I think what we see about in Mason and what we see at practice or training camp and things like that, other people just don't see that, every day. Yeah. So I think they can sell themselves more on the potential than what people like us who are kind of a little bit closer to the matter can see every day.
Yeah, I my mindset was the other way around. Like, the longer he sits around, the longer people are gonna be like, how long until this guy's out of the league? But maybe you're right. You know what I mean? Maybe not even as a starter, but just a guy that you're like, okay, like, the Cleveland Browns are a bad example, but a good example at the same time. They're not going to trade for Mason Rudolph, but they needed a quarterback. DTR wasn't getting it done as a rookie. They said, all right, let's call PJ Walker. Let's get PJ Walker out there. He's going to get a helmet. He's going to start. I think there are other teams. I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars possibly just lost their quarterback last night. Maybe that's an example. I do agree. Like, a team that's going to be searching for that QB3 right now, or that backup, Mason's a guy that you're not gonna give up a lot, but he could come in here. He's a professional. Everybody loves Mason Rudolph. Nobody in the locker room dislikes Mason Rudolph. The coaching staff loves Mason Rudolph. Everybody talks about how good of a guy Mason Rudolph, how good of a team he is, how smart he is working as a backup. I think that does make a lot of sense. After a couple of years, you know what I mean? I just feel like at this point we've talked Mason Rudolph dry. Yeah. Like, it's to a point where last year it was supposed to be the Detroit Lions. They didn't make a move for him. Maybe it's this year. Maybe this is the year that they're like, all right, we need a guy. I don't even know who Detroit's backups are, but last year it was like something Boyd or something. Tim Boyle. I don't even know. And they were looking for a backup quarterback. There's got to be a team out there. I think it does make sense. What are you giving up for Mason Rudolph? Your team that needs a backup quarterback. What are you calling the Pittsburgh Steelers for? You got to remember that, Omar Khan is involved, and that guy makes some moves. That guy, he does some things that should. Chase Claypool played 11 games for the 32nd pick in the draft. 11 games and did nothing in those 11 games. William Jackson came here for about 13 cents and a bag of Skittles. And I don't even think the Pittsburgh Steelers had to give anything up for him. I think the conditional 6th round pick turned into a 7th round pick in like 3 years.
Yep.
And they didn't even, I mean, they didn't get to play him, but they gave up nothing for him. So you got to remember Omar Khan's in this. What are you giving up for Mason Rudolph? Or what are you getting for Mason Rudolph?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm offering anything higher than a 6th-round pick or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe, like, depending on how desperate you are, maybe you work your way up to a 5th, but, like, that'd be quite a bit. Like, I think a 6 is about where you're sitting at. It's got to be draft picks. I don't think you're swapping players for a guy like Mason Rudolph. So that is 6th, 7th. You're not, and it's not multiple picks. No, it's one pick straight up for Mason. I think is the only thing that I'm kind of considering.
Yeah. I 6th would be good. Maybe a 5th, depending on the team. Let me toss this out there, okay? Justin Fields goes down. Hand injury. Could miss some time. And don't get me wrong, Nathan Peterman, a dude as a backup. You know, all respect to Nathan Peterman.
He didn't even.
That guy's
Fields went down. Yeah, he what was it? Baggett?
Tyson Baggett.
Yeah, we saw him at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, we did, and he did not look good at the Senior Bowl. Looked actually terrible at the Senior Bowl. But that's their backup right now. And Nathan Peterman, I mean, again, good guy. I respect anybody who's been cut and added as many times as he has this season on one team. Yeah. I hope he has not. I hope he stayed in his apartment. Like, at this point, he's got to just be like, well, I'm coming back tomorrow. Right. So whatever. Possibly need a backup quarterback. Possibly need a starting quarterback with Justin Fields going down. I'm taking Mason Rudolph before I take Tyson Baggett, whatever his name is. The Las Vegas Raiders, Jimmy G gets put into an ambulance yesterday, taken to the hospital because of a back injury. No idea how much time he's going to miss, according to, I don't know. I saw Dov Kleiman tweeted out, so I don't know where he got it from. He could be missing at least a game. Brian Hoyer is their backup. Maybe they make a phone call. That's certainly an option.
The Colts, Gardner Minshew, I think, threw 3 picks as a backup for the Colts yesterday.
The Colts, that's a great one, actually. You definitely got names. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have options. I mean, but let's be honest. The New England Patriots, they'd take anybody you could give them. At this point, they don't have a starter, a backup, and they're probably going to use Malik Willis as Malik Cunningham as a quarterback when he's clearly not a quarterback in the NFL. That's where they're at. So maybe that's an option. There are teams. I think like a year ago, we were like, oh, who needs a backup quarterback? It's the Detroit Lions. This year, it's like, there's like 4 or 5 teams that are in a tough spot and could be getting worse. Again, the Jacksonville Jaguars, we don't know what's going to happen with Trevor Lawrence. I think there's definitely better options than a year ago. Maybe. You think? Do you think that there's any chance that a team like Chicago, a team like Vegas, a team like Indy calls and they say something like, hey, look, Mason's cool, but we're not really looking for a backup. We're looking for somebody to come in here, compete to see if they could start. Would you consider trading Mitch Trubisky? Do you think that that's a possibility? Do you think that the Pittsburgh Steelers would show any interest in that possibility?
Well, I think you'd have to if someone comes calling, because if someone's looking for Mitch, like I said, they're a lot more desperate for a quarterback than someone who's calling for Mason Rudolph. So you could get a pretty decent haul, I think, for Mitch Trubisky, honestly. Like that, I don't know, if a team's calling him about you, like they're clearly looking for a starting caliber guy, and that commands a much higher price. And I think you could work your way up into like 4th or 3rd round draft pick territory, maybe even a little bit more. And maybe not a second, but I mean, if Chase Claypool went for a second, like,
yeah, but I think Chase still had like the
shine.
There's potential here. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, this guy's 6'3" and he runs a 4.32. Yeah, cool, that's fine, but he can't catch a football, so who cares? But I think a 3rd, 4th round pick from Mitch could definitely work depending on the team. And I mean, I don't see why not. You know what I mean? I don't see why you wouldn't consider that move if somebody came calling, and maybe somebody does come. I mean, Indianapolis is not a bad team right now. They just don't have a quarterback, and Anthony Richardson might miss the entire season because of the shoulder injury. Why not Mitch
can hand the ball up to Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss 50 times a game. Like, I think he's certainly capable of doing that. That's
what I'm saying. Run the football a little bit. You're good there. I think that's an option. I certainly think that's an option. I think dealing a quarterback makes a lot of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think it's made a lot of sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And at this point, like, you're not holding on to a quarterback because you're like, oh, well, Kenny's got to develop. No, Kenny is who we're hoping Kenny turns into something better, but Mitch Trubisky hanging around is not going to, it clearly is not helping the situation. I don't think it's going to make it any worse if he leaves. I feel like Kenny will be just fine either way. I think the more pressing issue is the offensive coordinator / himself.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's Mitch.
Yeah, I do think we kind of overplayed that a little bit. Like, during the offseason is how important Mitch Trubisky was to Kenny Pickett's development. Like, I think he certainly helps. I think he can be a good resource for Kenny, but he's not, the end all be all to Kenny's career.
No, not at all. So I think if a team calls and they say, hey, Omar, we're looking for a QB, toss both of them out there and say, hey, what you got for us? See what happens. And I think a move could be made. Do I expect one? I don't know. I'm not going to say no because Omar Khan's in the house and I didn't expect anything last year. And I sat there and I wrote like 4 stories in a row because everybody kept walking in the room and they're going, this guy's got next. This guy's got next. And I'm like, all right, sounds good. Keep them coming. So anything could happen.